Welcome to Mike's Retro Curiosities, where we explore the wonderful world of retro games. Today we're taking a look at Castlevania. Castlevania is a gothic horror-themed action platformer. It was originally released in 1986 for the Famicom Disk System by Konami, and then later released on cartridge for the NES and the Famicom. The premise is that Count Dracula returns every 100 years and attempts to utilize his army of monsters and the undead to take over the world. Players take on the role of Simon Belmont, vampire hunter and member of the Belmont clan, which has opposed Dracula for centuries. Players guide Simon as he fights his way through the Count's eponymous castle. The game is very much an homage to classic horror movies. This can be seen in the intro, which is made to look like a film reel, and many of the bosses are old-school horror icons such as the Mummy, as well as Frankenstein and Igor. Graphically, the game looks amazing for the NES and is still rather appealing even today, featuring highly expressive sprites and detailed backgrounds. Bear in mind that in 1986 it was still very common for backgrounds to be extremely basic, often just a single solid color with a couple of sparse elements. So the ruined hallways of Dracula's castle looked incredible for their time. It really brings the setting to life as you traverse dark galleries and whip your way through underground waterways. The game's music is fantastic as well, with a unique sound that's a mix of rock and classical that really gets you pumped. Several tracks such as Vampire Killer and Heart of Fire would go on to become series staples. In terms of gameplay, Castlevania utilizes tried but true action platforming mechanics. Players attack with the Vampire Killer Whip, which can be upgraded twice. Use of the whip is not instantaneous, requiring a brief moment of wind-up that needs to be taken into account. The whip has a fairly limited range and can only hit targets directly in front of the player, meaning that you are vulnerable to attacks from above and below. That is where the game's various sub-weapons come in. Found throughout the castle are various secondary weapons. These have limited ammunition, but can help compensate for some of Simon's weaknesses. Holy water can hit enemies below and create a damaging area that lingers and can hit enemies on the ground multiple times. The axe arcs upward, giving it the ability to hit enemies above Simon. The dagger is fairly weak, but it has good range and is fast. The cross acts like a boomerang, going out to the edge of the screen and then returning. When used correctly, the cross offers both excellent range and high damage potential due to the ability to hit enemies multiple times. And lastly, the stopwatch freezes enemies in place, though it's not effective against most bosses. Upgrades can be found, which increases the firing rate of a sub-weapon. This can at times be very overpowered, especially the fully upgraded Holy Water, which can absolutely melt most bosses. Platforming can at first seem somewhat awkward to those not used to it. Simon has a fixed arc to his jump, lacking the mid-air control of characters like Mario. On top of that, when Simon is hit, he goes flying backwards, often into the nearest bottomless pit. To a first-time player, these controls can seem stiff and clunky, but the game is built around them and uses them effectively. Castlevania is a game that demands a more considered and deliberate approach to platforming. But this brings me to my next point. Castlevania is extremely difficult, easily one of the hardest games on the NES. In fact, I still haven't managed to beat it. The farthest I've gotten without cheating is the Grim Reaper fight. The game is riddled with bottomless pits, instant death traps, enemies with erratic patterns, and plenty more that will cause Simon to meet an untimely end. Despite all of this, the game is never unfair or overly frustrating. For one thing, there are unlimited continues, so you can retry levels as much as you want. The game also does an excellent job at telegraphing and signposting. As a result, every death feels like it's your fault, and the game is so much fun that it can kick your butt 8 ways from Sunday, and yet still keep you coming back for more. All of this is supported with excellent stage design and pacing. There are only 6 stages, so the game is fairly short, or at least it would be if it weren't for the high difficulty. but each level is jam-packed with interesting challenges. This is very much a case of all killer with very little filler. Honestly, I kind of find it difficult to find much wrong with this game. Admittedly, compared to later entries in the series which built on Castlevania's formula, it does feel a bit basic. But even then, there's a certain purity to that simplicity that still makes this game worth playing. A couple of the bosses can be somewhat overwhelming, being almost impossible to beat without resorting to cheese strats. Plus, there are a couple of slightly frustrating sections that could have probably used some slight tweaks in their design. But overall, this is an excellent game that holds up incredibly well. In my opinion, it's easily one of the best games on the NES, if not the entirety of the 8-bit era. This game would of course go on to spawn a beloved long-running series that, while not quite as prominent as it once was, still continues to this day. Throughout which the original Castlevania would actually see numerous remakes and reimaginings. Simon Belmont would go on to become an iconic video game character, even making numerous appearances outside of his home series, such as in Super Smash Bros. Castlevania would also end up being fairly influential, inspiring numerous action platformers that came after. In terms of different ways that you can play this game, there's first obviously this cartridge version for the NES and the Famicom. As stated before, this was originally a Famicom Disk System game. The two versions are mostly the same, the only real differences being the addition of loading times, as well as the fact that the Famicom Disk System had the ability to let you save your progress. The game would see a re-release for the GBA as part of the classic NES series. It would also see releases for the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS Virtual Consoles. It was included as a part of the NES Classic Edition, and probably the easiest way to access it today is through the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, which is available for all modern platforms. But that'll be it for today. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This video is sponsored by M&M Games, and I will see you guys next time.